Welcome, everyone, to the Inclusion Podcast. I'm Dr. Julie Costin.
And I'm Dr. Christy Preddy-Franzak. We're so glad you're here as we explore all things inclusion.
So whether you're a school leader, an educator, a parent, or simply passionate about inclusion, this podcast is for you.
In each episode, we go beyond the usual conversations, diving into what truly makes inclusive education work.
Together, let's make a difference, one conversation at a time. Here we go. I have good news for you folks. Today is about reframing engagement, and that often with students, doing nothing is actually doing something.
I would even say for teachers and educators, quote unquote, doing nothing is actually doing something. We call that an access point through pause, wait time, but we won't get ahead of ourselves.
Oh, go ahead. I mean, I'm already excited. So Christy, do you mean to tell me that when a kid is sitting there or wandering or opting out, like saying no or staring out the window, that's okay?
I'm going to even pick on just staring out the window as a necessary part of the day.
Okay. So in this episode, we're going to challenge the idea that learning looks like busy, verbal, and compliant. And we're going to talk about what Christy just began to talk about, which is regulation and engagement and learning can look like quiet, slow, or an invisible task. And that we might have to honor the different rhythms in order to give all kids access. So this episode is going to invite us to stop interrupting regulation and start noticing what learning actually looks like.
Julie, stop disrupting regulation.
So
Where
Christy,
do you come up with these things?
This is so hard for me, and I am terrible at it. I do not like wait time.
I know you don't.
I do not like slow paced.
You do not like one thing on the screen without movement.
I need many things at the time. So maybe some of you know I have ADHD as an attribute and superpower and very big challenge. And for me as an educator, this was the hardest thing. It still is the hardest thing for me.
Even when we're co-teaching, if I give people 4 minutes to reflect, Julie's like, 4 minutes? They can do so much in 4 minutes. I'm like, they can't even get in a small group in 4 minutes.
I literally sometimes turn off my camera and lay on the floor during those 4 minutes and think like, and do a prayer like, dear Lord, help me get through these 4 minutes because it seems so long.
Or she'll say, I'm going to give you a whole 20 seconds. And I'm just like, what in the world will we do with 20 whole seconds?
But Christy, when I would co-teach, so picture this, even I'm picturing 8th grade, I'm picturing Lisa Barry Keppen was her name. So if you're listening, she was the science teacher, I was the special ed teacher. And I would say to the class, get the 7 things you need to get and join me over at the lab tables. You have 10 seconds, ready, go. And I was flippin' delighted by my strategy, by how fun it was, by how everybody was racing around the room. And, I would count down loudly too. So I would add a lot of input and I'd be like 9, 8, right? And it's so fun. And what Christy has taught me is that I just pushed probably half or more of those learners outside of their optimal learning experience because I set their nervous systems on fire. Now, it works for mine. I love to race and rush because that's how I actually can get myself to do anything all day long. So let's talk a little more about this, Christy, and why in school systems we have these ideas that learning looks like verbal, compliant, sitting still, eyes forward, hands working, but actually might look like wandering or staring out the window.
So at least 2 things, Julie.
Yeah.
when you first said why we think that, I thought you were inviting me to talk about the white dominant culture and our obsession with those things. And then I noticed it was more of a rhetorical to
Oh,
say learning can look like other things. But may I just say, for the record,
mm,
the why we prioritize the compliance, the eyes on me, the traditional way of looking is really from a colonial white dominant culture that has a very narrow view of learning.
hmm
And it's what the white dominant culture perpetuates as quality or where a teacher has control and students are in a dominated role, but I can't think of the word. Anyway,
hmm
subservient or
yeah,
something,
hmm
because that's like the value of the white dominant culture. So that aside, if
okay,
we use a brain-based lens, or let me just use a reality lens. I'm one adult and I have 25 kids. So, Julie, back to your example of the eighth grade
hmm yep,
lab, let's just say half the kids were like you and half the kids were like me. But you're
hmm
just one adult. What do? You don't get to say, oh, everybody just take your time. You have 42 minutes before the
hmm
next class period.
correct,
And some people need that to be motivated to do the lab experiment. So, what do
correct.
you do when you have all these different nervous systems plus yours?
Okay, I'm going to give an answer to it. And
Okay.
you might have not even wanted an answer, but I'm going to say these are the 7 items required for this lab. And they're in a visual form. I've explained them, I've shown them. And I say, you can come to the lab table in 10 seconds, or you can come to the lab table. You can take as long as 3 minutes, whatever you prefer, go. And now I go, ooh, I'm like Christy, and I'm going to gather my stuff and I'm going to alphabetize my things and make sure that they're in the correct order. And then I'm going to color code them on my way. And then I'm going to be the most prepared student at the lab that ever was or will be.
Did you see me sit up straighter?
Yeah, you're excited. I know. And for me, I'm going to race all around the room in a harried way. My hair will be a mess. I'll be flying around. I'll be grabbing the stuff and I'll be getting there safely, of course.
Of course.
But we both have options built in. Now, Christy, I've raced there. I'm there in 9.3 seconds.
Mm,
I get a moment to pause, which is really healthy for me because it's not how I roll.
yeah. Yeah, so it's like it's built in, but it's not all in the beginning. So like you can take your pause at a different time. So
Yeah.
it's like everybody doesn't have to be ready and everybody doesn't have to be ready to pause. Everybody doesn't have to be ready to nap. Like you've got this like little window where
Mm-hmm.
people can learn to self-regulate and bring themselves down from the running around or
Mm-hmm.
gear themselves up for the activity, whatever they might need. So let's just start there.
Mm-hmm.
We probably need to even start back with like what is engagement, why can it look like different things or why should it look like different things, because let's say you remain a little bit harried in my perspective, right?
Sure.
You're moving quickly, you're
Mm-hmm.
already done with half the lab lesson,
That's what I.
and the other kids are just getting there and you're
Mm-hmm.
like done. So and I'm like, you can't be done.
Mm-hmm.
So like I have to still honor that.
Oh, and there are ways to honor it, and there are ways to squash it or squelch it or make someone feel bad about it. So
Yeah.
I've always been the kid who was supposed to go back and add detail because you cannot be done by now, right? And my dream and goal is to get done so I can move on to more interesting things. Like my brain is expansive. I love to learn. I love to do things, but I'm not going to linger on a task that doesn't feel like it needs lingering on. So, what Christy's inviting us to do is recognize that we're using me and Christy as the example, but in every classroom, you're going to have this wild range of tolerance to pace and to verbal and to stillness and to every aspect of schooling. And I don't want it to be a spoiler alert, but essentially, it's the more you add in choice, about how to participate. And the more you say, wow, you did complete that. Excellent. Next. This is what I'm wondering. Do you want to do this or this? Right. And you keep the child engaged instead of saying, you can't be done. There's no possible way. This has got to be poor quality.
So, two things that made me think of, Julie.
Mhm.
One, we have a download for this handout because we're going to come back to this word participation, this word engagement. So, I want to make sure people get that at inclusiveschooling.com/download 70. We
Mhm.
also have a resource called Fast Finishers that are by
Mm.
age and grade level. That I'll put it on the show notes. We won't go into it because that could be a whole nother podcast episode. But
Mm.
if you're like, I do have kids that do things quickly, how do I honor that and keep them motivated to do something that is productive, quote unquote? Because some kids,
Mm.
be quite honest, their prefrontal cortexes are still developing. So they might start to go light fire to somebody's thing or
Sure.
poke them or distract them in some way.
Sure.
It's all fine. But how do we keep them on a path that keeps them engaged in a way that is still productive? But let's talk a little bit, Julie, about, you use the word participation. Sometimes
Mhm.
we use the word engagement. How do we help people look more broadly at their definition of that word or
I
those two
think
words?
I guess, Christy, it's honestly asking that question. What is my definition of engagement?
Yeah.
What else might be happening in this student's brain right now? And so engagement might look like listening without responding. It could look like observing. It could be just taking breaks between bursts of participation. It could be not choosing to engage yet. It
Mm.
could be just participating internally, but what we have to remember is engagement is not performance and it's very often not visible. And so, what you're asking is to say, well, what is our definition of engagement? Which is actually the question. And then, who benefits from our definition of engagement? So, learners like me benefited from my type of engagement. Fast thinkers, quick movers, excited learners, fast processors. Those were the people that I was advantaging. And
As a
yet,
teacher,
as a
I
teacher,
see.
and yet, there are plenty of people who are slower moving, more deliberate, more thoughtful, needing more time between tasks, all the ways that we want to talk about it, that I was disadvantaging. And so the fact that you said we have to look at our definition of participation and then ask one further question: who are we advantaging and who are we
Mm.
disadvantaging using this definition? And how do we make sure that a new definition can be formed that would benefit all the students in our classroom?
Yeah. And even if you're just one adult, how are
Mhm.
you using the environment? How are you structuring activities? Notice when Julie gave her example of choice, she said, I've got a visual of the directions. I've
Mhm.
verbally said the directions. They're posted at the lab stations as well as at the front of the class. So she's utilizing the environment as a co-teacher. She can
Mhm.
also have a station that is maybe where you go after you've finished that takes the lab experiment and circles back or goes further with it. So she's using stations to help her teach. All of these ideas start to come out and go, oh, this is possible, even if I'm just one person.
Yes.
So, Julie, let me ask you this
Mhm.
because we're a little bit mindset, a little bit about practice as we're going back and forth. You
Yeah.
know, we love language that lifts, we love restoring. Can you give us some language swaps for as I'm trying to move away from how I talk about a student who looks like they are not engaged?
Yes. Maybe something like this student needs regulation. This student takes time to recover between tasks. This student is working on sensory organization. So instead of saying things like off task or not participating or doing nothing, you would say they're regulating, they're processing, or they're
Mm.
engaging in a different way.
Oh,
As
And
opposed
those friends come straight from our handout or the download for this episode. Because, Julie, I just want you to do that one more time, the three reframes, but they can get it at inclusiveschooling.com/download 70. But just
mm,
say them one more time because they were so powerful.
yeah, so instead of saying off task, not participating, or doing nothing, you would say, the student is regulating, they're processing,
Yeah.
or they're engaging in a different way.
Ugh. Because I feel like sometimes people feel like they need to. I'm going to take on the role of a paraprofessional for a minute, and I might be assigned to a student, which is already a problematic practice, but you
Okay,
know what happens.
sure.
And I worry if my student that I'm supporting
Mm,
looks off task or
yeah.
unengaged, disengaged, right?
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
I feel like I always have to redirect them, make sure they're compliant, make sure that they're looking at the teacher, make sure they're on task. So this would
Mm.
be very freeing for me to be able to talk to my other adults in the room and my other team members saying, sometimes this child is actually processing the information or they're just regulating their system. So if you look over at us and it looks like they're off task, here's some other ways you might interpret what they're doing.
And I think, Christy, what you take, if you take what you just said and take it one step further, because you're nervous about them regulating, it
Yeah.
is likely that you're going to disrupt what they need to do to learn.
Yeah.
So it can be a very disruptive thing when we interrupt regulation. And we're doing so because it makes us more comfortable.
Yeah.
But in the reality, when adults interrupt quiet moments, we probably are making their nervous system more dysregulated. We're probably making them more confused. We're also communicating mistrust, which I think
Mm.
is so powerful.
Mm.
Mistrust, I just almost want to cry right here
I do too.
because even going back to my example of myself as a student,
Yeah.
every time I turned something in faster than the teacher could have imagined it to be
Yeah.
done, the look on their face was, I doubt it.
Or Julie, the opposite, like, why does it take you so long?
Oh, the opposite is why does it
Right?
take you so
Like
long?
that's the message I got was like,
Yes,
that task shouldn't have taken that long. Are you slow? Quote
yes,
unquote.
yes, yes. And it communicates that this human doesn't know their own regulatory system well enough and that there is a value being placed on being
Yeah.
fast or slow, loud or quiet, da 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 da.
Yep.
And all of those things do the opposite of supporting learning when we really want to say to students, "Ooh, I love that you took that time, Christy, to get that organized and
Oh,
together." And it's just like, I can see that this feels really important to you.
I can't imagine if somebody would have said that to me.
Yeah,
Or what if someone said to you, Julie, like, you're amazing how fast you can process and do these things. I'm so excited that you're learning even more than I had planned.
right. And Christy, you're the only person in my whole life that's ever said it because you've noticed it that I can process really
Oh,
fast. And
yeah.
and so I always am like, Christy, give the example of how fast I'm at processing because I love to hear it.
Well, I'm sure you do because I was that person in your life too. I was like, Julie, you did not read all that. And she'd
Hmm.
be like, do you want me to tell you what it said? And I'd be like, yeah. And then
Hmm.
she would. And I'd be like, oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
But like, do you really understand it? Like, I wanted to doubt her.
Right. Right. And it's just like what we have to do is not just expect and not just tolerate, but actually celebrate and support the ranges of learners in every single classroom and making sure that our definitions of things like engagement and learning aren't limiting some students and advantaging others, but we're widening what we're seeing and saying as engagement and learning. And that's really kind of the whole thing in this podcast is that we might have to reset for our listeners every time we might say something like, why isn't this student engaged? And we might instead ask, what might be happening internally right now? Because that shift is going to change everything in the way that you look at and evaluate your students.
Well, and Julie, I know we're getting a little long-winded in this one, but I'm going to take that, what you just said, a little further. Like, I love those invitations to ask those questions and to be curious.
Yeah.
I'm also going to say, as we're learning more and more about the brain, if you look at some of the work of neuroscientists, people know that we follow the work of Dan Siegel quite extensively, or we resonate with it, and our own work aligns. He talks about a healthy mind platter. And so, like,
Yes.
I'm not just asking these questions just out of curiosity or to be kind, but it's actually to look at this healthy mind platter. And he makes an argument that there are these 7 different times that a body needs, like focus time, fine,
Mm-hmm.
physical time, connecting time. People go, sure, sure, sure. But one of the times is downtime.
Mm.
And I would say kids with disabilities, when you said, who am I advantaging and who I'm not? I would say
Mm-hmm.
those outliers. And you and
Yes.
I, diagnosis or not, we're some of those outliers in terms of our processing
Mm-hmm.
time.
Mm-hmm.
And so, was downtime valued in our families, in our communities, in our schools, in our after school programs? Didn't matter where, again, because of the white dominant culture. But a downtime is non focused. The aim is not to have a goal other than relaxing and recharging the system, reducing the negative impact that all of those stressors had. It's called daydreaming, open ended play, exploration, being curious, right? No bombardment. Even when you, Julie, are moving quickly, there's another side to you
Mm-hmm.
that needs absolute either really zoned in on something or zoned out, right? Like watching
Mm-hmm.
some sort of documentary or
Mm-hmm.
some sort of housewife show or whatever, right?
Right.
But so it doesn't mean you always need your
Mm-hmm.
body also needs that downtime. You need time to like turn inward or zone out or space off. And I think so many of our kids with disabilities have IEP, specially designed minutes, and we have a para, and we have this person coming in to work with us. There's no time to just zone out.
Because we have on task time on our
Right.
IEP and someone's
Right.
taking data on it. So I better look like I'm learning all the time. And I mean, Christy, you're describing something that took me until I was an adult to realize that my body will take downtime after I pushed it too far in a way
Yeah.
that it's not expected or planned, meaning I fall face first into bed and that's how I stay for a while. And we've got to help kids learn that daydreaming and those beautiful moments of doing nothing can actually be pretty magical.
Mm.
So today we just want to thank you for joining us and beginning this discussion around accepting different types of engagement, accepting who gets to belong and widening that in new ways. And I just want to say thanks for slowing down with us today because we often rush through these podcasts. And today we're doing it a little slower. So thank you. Thank you for tuning in, and don't forget to subscribe and catch up on past episodes where we share valuable insights, straight talk, and practical steps to challenge outdated special education practices. You can find every episode with the show notes at inclusiveschooling.com/inclusion-podcast to build more inclusive schools together.